I remember the moment I chose to betray humanity, not with guns or bombs, but with words. Simple words scratched onto parchment with trembling hands. My name, rank, and a formal request for extraction from Imperial space. The irony was not lost on me. For 27 years I had served as a scribe in the administratum. My life was words, my purpose was records. Now words would condemn me as a traitor. The courier who took my message said nothing. He would deny all knowledge if caught, but I knew the network existed. Whispers in forgotten data stacks, rumors among the discontented, channels to contact them, the Tau, the enemy who spoke of peace while Imperial propaganda screamed of extinction. I had seen enough falsified records to know when truth was being sanitized. I had filed enough execution notices to recognize the pattern of a regime terrified of ideas. My small hab unit on Tholus Prime felt especially cold that night. The heating had failed again. The administratum saw no reason to waste resources on clerk comfort. I sat in darkness and wondered if my message would reach its destination or simply lead to my execution. I had no illusions about the Inquisition. They would not be gentle with a man who chose aliens over his own kind. I was 46 standard Terran years old. My back was permanently hunched from decades bent over cogitator screens. My eyes were weak from strain. My lungs rattled from the toxic air processors in the Underhive archives. The Imperium had used me until I was nearly spent. And for what? To record the deaths of billions? To catalog the endless requisitions for war materials? To stamp approval on tithe increases while planets starved? Something fractured within me the day I processed the Vorlon suppression. A billion lives reduced to a data point. A forge world that questioned production quotas and suffered for it. I was ordered to alter the records, to change civilian dead to military casualties, to erase the records of children, incinerated by naval bombardment, to transform genocide into glorious compliance. I knew the Tau were alien. I knew their talk of the greater good might be lies. But at least their lies included the promise of living, of respect, of purpose beyond dying in countless numbers to feed the machine of endless war. The morning came with the familiar toxic haze. Another day of ritual and procedure. I washed in cold water, donned my scribe robes, and joined the shuffling mass of workers heading to the administratum spire. I wondered if they were watching me already, if my rooms had been searched, if today would be my last as a free man. The archives were the same as always. Towering stacks of data slates, servitors mindlessly filing, fellow scribes hunched over their stations, murmuring prayers to the machine god as they typed. I took my place and began my daily ritual. And waited. 3 days passed, long enough that I began to believe my message had been intercepted or ignored. Then came the code phrase, whispered by a maintenance worker as he replaced a light panel above my station. The spider mends its web at the western gate. The instruction was clear. Western Refuse Port. Midnight. No possessions. I felt a strange calm. My decision was made. I had crossed a line from which there was no return. That night, I walked out of my hab for the last time, carrying nothing but the clothes on my back and the microchip embedded in my wrist that identified me as Imperial property. The smell of the refuse port was overwhelming. Chemical waste mixed with organic decay. Massive haulers dumped the unwanted byproducts of Imperial industry into waiting barges. The workers wore masks and moved like ghosts in the darkness. No one saw me slip behind a corroded storage tank. No one noticed when I didn't come back out. The Tau vessel was small, barely more than a shuttle, hidden beneath camouflage netting among the waste containers. The pilot was my first glimpse of them. Tall, gray, skinned, with a face that reminded me strangely of the bovines that pulled carts on my childhood agri-world. His armor was sleek, without the brutal edges of Imperial design. He gestured for me to enter without speaking. The interior was cramped but clean, functional. 3 other humans sat in silence, avoiding eye contact. Fellow defectors. I recognized none of them. Better that way. We exchanged no words as the craft hummed to life, vibrating beneath us as it prepared to break atmosphere. I expected alarms, searchlights, the roar of Imperial interceptors, but there was nothing. Just the gentle pressure as we ascended, then the weightless feeling as we broke free of the planet's gravity. Had it been that easy? Or had they simply let us go, tracking our vessel to lead them to a larger target? One of the humans finally spoke. A woman, perhaps 30, with the hard eyes of someone who had seen combat. "Former guard?" she asked me. I shook my head. "Administratum. Scribe 3rd class." She seemed disappointed. "Not many of your kind make the jump. Too comfortable. Too indoctrinated." "I saw things," I said simply. "We all did," she replied, then fell silent again. The journey lasted 3 weeks. We spent most of it in a sleep state, induced by drugs administered by Tau medical drones. Sensible, we knew the location of an Imperial world. Best we not know the coordinates of wherever they were taking us. When we were awake, we were fed bland but nutritious meals and permitted to watch instructional videos about Tau society, the greater good, the castes, the ethereals. It was propaganda, of course, but gentler than Imperial variety, no screaming commissars or threats of execution. Just calm voices explaining how each being served according to their talents, guided by benevolent leadership. I found myself wanting to believe it, needing to believe it. What choice did I have? There was nowhere else to go, no other refuge from Imperial retribution. We emerged from our final sleep cycle to find the shuttle docking with a larger vessel. Through a viewport, I caught my first glimpse of a Tau warship. Elegant curves where Imperial ships were jagged mountains of metal, glowing energy fields rather than brutal void shields. Everything about it spoke of a different philosophy. War as precision rather than overwhelming force. The docking bay was busy with activity. Tau of various builds moved with purpose. Some were clearly warriors, others appeared to be technicians or officers. Among them walked humans and other species I didn't recognize, all working together without apparent tension. It was jarring after a lifetime of Imperial xenophobia. A tall Tau approached our group. His armor was more ornate than the others, and he carried himself with authority. "I am Shaso Kais," he said in perfect low Gothic, "commander of this cadre and your new superior. You have made a difficult choice to join us. That courage is respected, but you must understand that your past lives are over. Here, you will be given new purpose within the greater good." One of the humans with us, a thin man with nervous eyes, spoke up. "We were promised freedom." Shazo Kais nodded. "Freedom to contribute. Freedom from Imperial oppression. Freedom to live without fear of execution for questioning authority. But not freedom from responsibility or duty. The greater good requires all to serve according to their abilities." It seemed reasonable enough. Even the Imperium claimed to offer purpose rather than freedom. At least here, the purpose might not involve dying horribly for an emperor who neither knew nor cared about your sacrifice. "You will undergo orientation and assessment," the commander continued. "Your skills will be evaluated, and you will be assigned appropriate roles. Those who show aptitude may undergo further enhancement and training. You are no longer Imperial citizens. You are Gweveza, human helpers, and valued auxiliaries of the Tau Empire." Gweveza, a new designation, a new identity. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, even as a new one settled in its place. I was no longer Alaric Vey, administratum scribe. I was no longer a servant of the God Emperor. I was something new, something untested, something hopeful. We were separated after that, each taken to individual chambers for what they called processing. My room was small but comfortable, a sleeping platform, washing facilities, and a food dispenser that produced surprisingly palatable nutrition blocks. The door was locked, but I was told this was temporary until my evaluation was complete. The evaluation began with medical examinations. Tau physicians, assisted by human nurses, conducted thorough scans and tests. They seemed particularly interested in my brain activity and genetic makeup. Samples were taken, questions were asked about my family history, exposure to warp entities, psychic sensitivity. Standard screening, I assumed, to ensure I carried no hidden Imperial bioweapons or warp taint. Next came psychological assessment, hours of questions about my beliefs, my loyalty to the Imperium, my reasons for defection. I was honest. What was the point of lies now? I told them about the Vorland's suppression, about the daily horrors recorded in administratum archives, about my disillusionment with a system that crushed the many to serve the few. The Tau evaluator, a member of what they called the Earth caste, nodded sympathetically. Your experience is common among human defectors. The Imperium of Man claims to protect humanity, yet treats individual humans as disposable. This contradiction creates cognitive dissonance that eventually becomes unbearable for thinking minds. Thinking minds. The phrase struck me. The Imperium discouraged thinking. Obedience was the highest virtue. Questions were heresy. Here, this alien spoke of thought as if it were natural and necessary. After psychological evaluation came skill assessment. My literacy, mathematical ability, memory, and knowledge of imperial bureaucracy were tested extensively. The Tau seemed impressed with my recall of administrative codes and procedures. Such information has strategic value, my evaluator noted. Understanding how the Imperium manages resources helps us predict their movements and capabilities. I felt a momentary twinge of guilt. Was this betrayal? But I reminded myself that the Imperium had betrayed its own people countless times. My loyalty had been abused. Now I would give it to those who might value it more. On the 7th day, I was summoned to receive my assignment. The chamber was larger than my quarters, dominated by a holographic display showing what appeared to be a city under construction. 3 Tau waited for me, 1 warrior caste, 1 earth caste, and 1 in robes that marked him as something different, an ethereal, I realized. One of the leadership caste I had learned about in the orientation videos. Gweveza Alaric Ve. The ethereal spoke, his voice melodious and strangely calming. Your evaluation shows great promise. Your knowledge of imperial administration and your literacy in multiple data formats will be valuable to the water caste in their diplomatic and intelligence operations. I bowed, unsure of the proper protocol, but feeling it appropriate to show respect. You will be assigned to the administrative division of our newest human integration center on Teros, the ethereal continued. There you will help process new human converts to the greater good and assist in cataloging imperial information brought by defectors. Processing defectors, I would be helping others like myself. It seemed fitting. Using my administratum skills not to record deaths, but to facilitate new beginnings. You will receive implants to help you communicate more efficiently with Tau systems, the Earth caste representative added. Minor neural interfaces only, nothing that will alter your cognitive functions. I nodded, though the thought of implants made me uneasy. The Imperium used neural implants too, but usually only on servitors or high-ranking officials. For ordinary citizens, such technology was considered dangerously close to tech heresy. Do you accept this assignment in service to the greater good? The ethereal asked. What choice did I have? Return was impossible. But more than that, I wanted this, wanted purpose, wanted to believe in something again, even if that something was alien. I accept, I said. The ethereal smiled. An expression I would learn was rare among their kind. Then, welcome, truly, to the Tau Empire. May your service bring harmony to all. 2 days later, I underwent the implantation procedure. The discomfort was minimal, and recovery swift thanks to Tau medical technology. A small port behind my ear, almost invisible unless specifically looked for. Through it, I could interface directly with Tau data systems, receiving information in a form my human brain could interpret. It was efficient, elegant. When I was deemed recovered, I was transferred to a transport bound for Taros. I was not alone. Dozens of human defectors were making the same journey. Some were former Imperial Guard, their bodies scarred from countless battles. Others were civilians, refugees from worlds caught in the crossfire between Imperium and Tau. A few were like me, administrators or technicians with valuable skills. We were permitted to mingle during the journey, exchanging stories and anxieties. Most seemed cautiously optimistic about their new lives. The Tau had treated them well so far, better than the Imperium ever had. But there was an undercurrent of unease. We were moving into the unknown, casting our lot with Xenos. Centuries of Imperial indoctrination were not easily overcome. I met Elira during this transit, former Medicae adept from a hive world in the Damocles Gulf. She had defected after Tau forces captured her hospital, and she witnessed their treatment of wounded from both sides. They have no concept of triage based on rank, she told me, still sounding amazed. Commanders waited while common soldiers were treated. They said the greater good was served by preserving all useful lives. Useful lives. The phrase stuck with me. Different from the Imperium's calculus, which valued lives based on lineage or political connection. But still a calculus, still measuring worth by contribution. Taros was breathtaking. From orbit, it appeared as a world of sweeping plains and geometric cities, connected by graceful transit systems. As our shuttle descended, I saw vast agricultural zones, carefully managed forests, and what appeared to be massive construction projects. The Tau were building, expanding, developing, so different from many imperial worlds I had documented, stagnant for millennia or slowly decaying from past glory. The Human Integration Center was located at the edge of a major Tau city, a complex of elegant buildings surrounded by gardens and training grounds. Not a prison, but not entirely open either. The perimeter was monitored, movement in and out was controlled. For our protection, we were told. While we adjusted, my quarters were spacious by imperial standards, clean, well lit, with amenities that would be considered luxuries on most imperial worlds. A private washing facility with hot water, climate control, a food station that offered multiple options rather than the nutrient gruel I had subsisted on for decades, a data terminal connected to approved information networks. Work began immediately. My role was to interview new human arrivals, assess their skills and knowledge, and catalog any valuable intelligence they brought regarding imperial movements or capabilities. I was paired with a Tau watercaste official named Por Otashvar, who oversaw my work and provided cultural guidance. Many humans struggle with the transition, he explained during our first meeting. The Imperium infuses every aspect of human existence with religious significance and xenophobic fear. Overcoming this conditioning takes time and patience. I found him easy to work with. Tashvar was curious about human culture and psychology, asking thoughtful questions about imperial life that went beyond simple intelligence gathering. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding how humans thought and why the Imperium functioned as it did. "Your administratum fascinates me," he confessed after we had worked together for several weeks. "Such inefficiency, yet such resilience. Reports pass through hundreds of hands before action is taken, yet somehow your empire endures. It defies logical analysis. Faith sustains it," I suggested, "not efficiency. Belief in the emperor provides unity that overcomes bureaucratic failure." Tashvar made a gesture I would come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. Faith is powerful, but insufficient explanation. There is something more. Some core of human adaptability that persists despite your systems rather than because of them. The work itself was familiar enough. Interviews, data entry, analysis. The content was different, but the process resembled my duties in the administratum. The difference was purpose. Here, I was helping build something rather than merely documenting decay. Each defector processed was another human saved from imperial oppression. Each piece of intelligence gathered might prevent unnecessary deaths in future conflicts. I began to believe in the greater good, not with the blind fervor of imperial faith, but with cautious intellectual acceptance. It made sense: cooperation over competition, specialization according to ability, leadership by the wise rather than the strong or wealthy. The practical results were visible all around us. Tyros prospered. Its people, of all species, appeared healthy and purposeful. 3 months after my arrival, I was promoted. My efficiency metrics were exceptional, and I had developed a system for categorizing imperial intelligence that Tashvar found particularly useful. My new role gave me greater access privileges and responsibility for training newer human arrivals in Tau administrative protocols. It was then that I began to notice certain patterns, small things at first: the way information was compartmentalized, how humans were encouraged to mix with other humans but had limited social contact with Tau outside of work assignments, the subtle but constant messaging about the greater good that permeated every aspect of daily life. One evening, I raised these observations with Elira. We had become close, finding comfort in shared human experience amid our alien surroundings. She worked in the medical division, adapting imperial medical knowledge for use in treating human auxiliaries. "Have you noticed that we never see the living quarters of the Tau?" I asked her as we walked through the center's gardens, a designated recreation area for human workers. She glanced around before answering, a habit we both retained from imperial life. They live separately. Cultural differences make shared habitation impractical. But we're never invited to observe their culture directly. Everything we learn comes through approved channels. She frowned. "What are you suggesting, Alaric? That they're hiding something?" I wasn't sure myself. Not hiding, perhaps. Controlling the narrative. Managing our integration carefully. Of course they are. We're former enemies. Trust must be earned. She was right, logically. Yet something felt rehearsed about her response, as if she were repeating words given to her rather than expressing her own thoughts. "Have you received neural updates?" I asked, changing the subject slightly. She nodded. 3 so far. Minor adjustments to the interface. They improve efficiency and reduce stress. You should request them if you haven't already. I had received notice of available updates but had hesitated, telling myself it was residual imperial superstition about technology. Now I wondered if it was something more. Instinct, perhaps. Caution. That night, I used my data terminal to access information about Tau neural interfaces. Most of what I found was technical specification beyond my understanding, but there were references to harmonizing thought patterns and optimizing neural pathways for improved ideological integration. Improved ideological integration. The phrase might have come straight from an Imperial Commissar's manual. Different words for indoctrination. I began paying closer attention to my fellow humans, particularly those who had been with the Tau longer. There was a pattern to their speech, a consistency of phrasing when discussing the greater good or Tau leadership. Their emotional responses seemed dampened, especially negative emotions like anger or suspicion. They functioned well, were productive, and apparently content, but something was missing. Individuality, perhaps, the rough edges of human personality. I started declining neural updates, citing compatibility issues with my specific implant configuration, a technical excuse that seemed to satisfy my supervisors. I also began carefully documenting my observations, using an old imperial cipher to keep private notes that the Tau monitoring systems would not flag. 6 months into my new life, an opportunity arose. A delegation of Earth-caste scientists was visiting our facility to evaluate human integration progress. As part of their assessment, they requested detailed reports on human adaptation rates and productivity metrics. Tashvar assigned me to compile this data, which gave me access to previously restricted information. What I found disturbed me: statistics on human neural plasticity, genetic compatibility assessments, long-term population projections. The Tau were not merely accepting human defectors as allies, they were studying us, evaluating our potential for physiological and psychological modification. There were references to selective breeding programs aimed at enhancing traits deemed beneficial to the greater good, while minimizing problematic human characteristics like aggression and individuality. Most alarming were the references to something called the Assimilation Initiative. I could access only summary documents, but they contained phrases like final phase integration and genetic optimization of WH40k stock. This was not alliance, this was absorption, the systematic transformation of humans into something designed to fit Tau civilization perfectly. I needed to know more, but direct questions would raise suspicion. Instead, I began volunteering for additional duties that might expand my access. I requested transfer to the Historical Documentation Division, suggesting that my imperial administrative background made me well suited to organizing information about human and Tau interactions. The request was approved, though with an unexpected condition. Neural concordance evaluation required prior to security clearance upgrade, the notification read. In other words, they wanted to check my brain before giving me access to more sensitive information. I couldn't refuse without drawing attention. So I reported to the medical facility as instructed, where a Tau physician and his human assistant waited with equipment I didn't recognize. "Standard procedure," the human assistant assured me. Her voice was calm, her expression serene. Too serene. "The scan is non-invasive and takes only moments." I sat in the indicated chair, forcing myself to appear relaxed as they positioned scanning devices around my head. The Tau physician manipulated controls on a nearby console, then frowned at the readings. "Irregular pattern detection," he said to his assistant. "Possible interface degradation or incomplete update integration." The assistant turned to me with that same placid expression. "When did you last accept a neural update, WH40k?" I received notification of several, but experienced discomfort after attempting the resond. "First," I lied. "I filed exemption request T14 with medical supervision." She consulted her records. "I see no such exemption. It was processed through Administrator Call in Central Division." I improvised, naming an administrator I knew had recently been transferred off-world. Perhaps the record's transfer was incomplete. The Tau physician seemed uncomfortable with this procedural discrepancy. "We will need to verify this exemption before proceeding with clearance evaluation. Please return to your duties until this matter is resolved." I was dismissed, but I knew the respite was temporary. They would discover my deception soon enough. And then what? Would I be considered defective, unsuitable for further integration, or simply scheduled for mandatory updates to correct my problematic thought patterns? I needed to act quickly. That night, I used my position to access transfer records, looking for opportunities. I found one in a requisition for human administrative support at a research outpost in a recently established Tau colony. The isolation and high security nature of the facility meant they struggled to staff it adequately. I submitted my application, emphasizing my proven loyalty and efficiency. 3 days later, as investigations into my missing medical exemption were surely narrowing, I received approval for transfer. The outpost was designated Research Station Kortal, location classified, departure in 2 days. I was both relieved and apprehensive. I was buying time, but also potentially isolating myself further from any hope of escape if I was right about Tau intentions. I sent a message to Elira, asking to meet before my departure. We had grown apart in recent weeks as her neural updates continued and her behavior became increasingly aligned with Tau expectations. Still, she was the closest thing to a friend I had in this new life. Perhaps some core of her true self remained accessible. We met in the garden as before. She congratulated me on my transfer, describing it as recognition of my value to the greater good. Her words were right, but something in her eyes seemed wrong, distant, as if she were viewing me through a lens of evaluation rather than genuine connection. "Elira," I said carefully, "do you ever miss your life in the Imperium?" She tilted her head slightly, as if the question confused her. "The Imperium is inefficient and cruel. The greater good provides purpose and harmony." Yes, but do you miss anything? Any personal connections or experiences? Inefficient attachments impede optimal functioning, she replied. The water caste has helped me understand this. Her response chilled me, not because of the content, which was standard Tao philosophy, but because of the delivery, flat, rehearsed, without the emotional nuance that had characterized our earlier conversations. Illyra, I pressed, lowering my voice, are you still you? For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Confusion, perhaps fear. Then it was gone, replaced by that serene certainty. I am an improved version of myself, Alaric. As you will be, once your neural patterns are properly harmonized. I changed the subject after that, discussing trivial matters about my upcoming transfer. But the exchange confirmed my worst suspicions. The neural interfaces were more than communication tools. They were changing how humans thought, bringing us into harmony with Tau expectations. The journey to Research Station Cortal took 4 days. I was the only passenger on a small transport vessel crewed by Tau Air caste pilots. They spoke little to me, focusing on their duties. I spent the time reviewing the limited information provided about my new assignment. The station was conducting research on environmental adaptation, developing technologies to make newly conquered worlds more suitable for Tau habitation. My role would be coordinating supply requisitions and maintaining personnel records. Simple administrative work. The reality was far different. Research Station Cortal orbited an airless moon in a system I couldn't identify. The facility itself was massive, much larger than the ecological research station described in my briefing. Armed Firecast troops patrolled the corridors. Security checkpoints restricted movement between sections. I was processed by a bored-looking human administrator who had clearly been with the Tau for many years. His neural interface was more extensive than mine, with visible components extending from behind his ear along his jawline. You'll be assigned to Sector 7, Data Management, he informed me after scanning my identification. Quarters in Human Habitation Block C. Report to Supervisor Porel Kaisnan at 0600 tomorrow. What exactly is researched here? I asked, attempting casual conversation. He looked at me with the same flat expression I had seen on Illyra. Each sector has specific focuses. You will be briefed on relevant aspects of your assigned section. That night, in my sterile quarters, I contemplated my situation. I had escaped one form of control only to discover another. The Imperium dominated through fear and faith. The Tau through technology and manipulation. Was there any true freedom to be found in this galaxy? Sector 7 proved to be a massive data storage and analysis center. Rows of human operators interfaced with Tau systems, processing information flowing in from countless sources. My supervisor, Porel Kaisnan, was a severe water caste administrator who valued efficiency above all. Your personnel file indicates exceptional processing capacity for a human, he noted during our first meeting. You will be assigned to subsection Theta, analyzing integration reports from conquered Imperial worlds. Conquered, not liberated, not allied with. The word choice was telling. Subsection Theta was a restricted area that required additional security clearance. Again, I faced the prospect of neural evaluation. This time, there would be no easy evasion. I submitted to the scan, but focused my thoughts on loyalty and service, conjuring memories of my most productive work for the Tau. Whether it was my mental discipline or simple luck, I passed the evaluation and received clearance for subsection Theta. What I found there explained everything. The assimilation initiative was not merely a program. It was the ultimate goal of all Tau expansion. Comprehensive data on human physiology, psychology, and genetics filled the databases. Test results from various methods of control and modification. Projections for optimal human development over generations to produce ideal auxiliary species. Humans redesigned to serve perfectly, without the inconvenient traits that made us unpredictable allies. There were other species in the databases too, each being studied, modified, and guided toward a form that would fit perfectly into the Tao vision of galactic order. The greater good was not cooperation between equals, it was assimilation into a carefully engineered hierarchy with the Tao, specifically the ethereals, at its apex. Most disturbing were the records of failed integration subjects, humans and other species who rejected neural modification or showed resistance to indoctrination. They were not executed as the Imperium might do with dissenters. Instead, they were designated for enhanced reconditioning or, if that failed, assigned to labor divisions where their physical capabilities could serve while their minds were gradually broken down and rebuilt. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making. I had fled one form of oppression only to deliver myself into another, more insidious form. The Imperium at least was honest in its brutality. The Tao concealed their domination behind smiles and promises of harmony. For weeks, I performed my assigned duties while secretly gathering information. I needed to understand the full scope of what I had discovered. I needed to know if there was any hope of warning others, of perhaps finding a third path that led neither back to Imperial cruelty nor deeper into Tao control. I learned to work around the surveillance systems, creating tiny blind spots in the data where I could research without detection. I made contact with other humans who showed signs of resistance, though such connections were dangerous. Most had undergone multiple neural updates and would report suspicious behavior immediately. Then came the breakthrough. In processing reports from a newly established colony, I discovered references to a rogue human settlement. Defectors who had fled Tao control after discovering the truth, establishing a hidden community on the fringes of Tao space. The reports indicated Tao forces were searching for this settlement, considering it a threat to the greater good and a source of dangerous misinformation. Hope kindled within me. If others had escaped, perhaps I could too. If this settlement existed, perhaps there was a place for humans who rejected both Imperial and Tao control. I needed access to navigational data, to communication systems. I needed allies. But I had seen what happened to those who resisted openly. I would have to be more subtle. I carefully cultivated a persona of increasing acceptance and integration. I volunteered for additional duties. I expressed interest in further neural updates, though I found excuses to delay actual implementation. I became a model Guevesa, earning trust and expanded access privileges. All the while, I searched for others like myself. Humans who maintained that flicker of resistance behind compliant eyes. I found few. Most had succumbed to the neural conditioning or been removed for reconditioning. But there were some. A maintenance technician who asked too many questions about restricted areas. A security auxiliary who maintained old Imperial combat traditions in private. A pilot who collected forbidden items from human culture. Small acts of rebellion. Tiny assertions of humanity in the face of systematic erasure. None of us spoke openly of resistance. That would be suicide. But we recognized each other through subtle signals, building a fragile network of awareness. 1 year after my arrival at Research Station Kora Tal, an opportunity presented itself. A Tao delegation was scheduled to visit an outlying colony where resistance to integration had been reported. The delegation would include water caste diplomats, fire caste security, and earth caste technical specialists to adjust neural interface parameters for the human population. They required administrative support staff. I volunteered. The selection process was rigorous. Neural concordance evaluations, loyalty assessments, performance reviews. I passed them all, having learned to project exactly what the Tao expected to see. I was assigned to the delegation as a data specialist, responsible for documenting integration progress and identifying problem individuals for special attention. The colony was located on a small agricultural world, recently brought into the Tao Empire. Most of the human population consisted of former imperial citizens who had surrendered when their world was conquered. They had not chosen Tao rule as I had, but found themselves subject to it nonetheless. Our delegation was housed in the administrative center, a converted imperial governor's palace. The contrast between Imperial Gothic architecture and Tao minimalist modifications was jarring, a physical representation of the cultural assimilation taking place. My duties took me throughout the colony, documenting living conditions and integration progress. I saw the pattern repeated on a larger scale. Humans who had received neural interfaces were compliant, productive, and expressed satisfaction with Tao rule. Those who had not yet been processed showed varying degrees of resistance or confusion, struggling to understand the new order imposed upon them. The water-caste diplomats spoke of choice and opportunity. The neural interfaces were presented as gifts, technological enhancements to improve quality of life. Many humans accepted this framing, seeing the Tao as liberators from imperial oppression. They did not understand that they were trading one form of control for another. I documented it all, playing my role perfectly while looking for my chance. Information about the rogue human settlement remained elusive, but rumors persisted. Whispers among the colonists about a place beyond Tao reach. A place for true humans. On the third week of our mission, we traveled to a remote agricultural outpost where integration had been particularly successful. The human population there had achieved nearly perfect neural concordance, according to preliminary reports. They were to be studied as a model for future integration efforts. The outpost was surrounded by vast fields of grain, tended by human workers under Tao supervision. The buildings were simple but functional, a blend of repurposed imperial structures and new Tao construction. From a distance, it appeared peaceful, productive. As we approached, I noticed something odd. The humans in the fields moved with mechanical precision. Their faces showed no expression, not even the serene contentment I had come to associate with neural integration. They were like servitors, though without the extensive augmentation the Imperium used. The outpost administrator, a Tau Earth-caste scientist named Theo O'Dalith, greeted our delegation with pride. "You witness the future of human integration," he announced. "Phase 3, neural harmonization, has achieved optimal results. Production efficiency has increased 78% while resource consumption has decreased." The delegation toured the facility, observing the humans at work and rest. They performed their duties without complaint or distraction. They ate when scheduled, slept when directed, spoke only when required for task completion. Perfect auxiliaries. How was this level of compliance achieved? Asked Poromestan, the lead water-caste diplomat. Targeted modification of the limbic system, Theo O'Dalith explained. Previous integration protocols preserved too much emotional variation. This led to inconsistent results. The new protocol creates a more uniform response pattern. These subjects maintain physical health? Asked a medical specialist. Optimal functioning. Reproductive capacity is preserved, though controlled centrally rather than through pair bonding. This allows for more efficient genetic selection. They spoke of humans as livestock being bred for desirable traits. I maintained my professional demeanor, taking notes as required, while inside I screamed. That night, in my assigned quarters, I made my decision. I could not return to the research station, knowing what I now knew. I could not continue to serve a system that planned the systematic destruction of human identity. I had to escape. The opportunity came 3 days later. Our delegation was scheduled to visit another outlying settlement, traveling by ground transport across sparsely populated agricultural land. I had noted that security was lighter during these transits, as the Tau considered the area fully pacified. During the journey, I feigned illness, a digestive disturbance that required immediate attention. The transport stopped. I was allowed to step away from the transport for privacy, a small courtesy that would be their undoing. The moment I was out of direct sight, I fled into the tall grain fields surrounding the road. I ran until my lungs burned, pushed beyond what my desk-bound body should have been capable of. Fear and desperation proved powerful motivators. They would discover my absence within minutes. Pursuit would be immediate. I had only a small head start and no clear destination. But in that moment, running was enough. The simple act of defiance, of self-determination, filled me with a savage joy I had not experienced in years. Night fell as I continued, moving, using the unfamiliar stars to maintain direction away from the settlement. The agricultural zone eventually gave way to uncultivated wilderness, rolling hills covered in dense vegetation similar to the forests of my childhood world. I pushed deeper into the cover, hoping to evade the thermal sensors I knew the tower would deploy. I heard the whine of anti-grav engines in the distance, search parties. I found a stream and waded through it, an old trick to confuse tracking devices. Then I crawled beneath a fallen tree, covering myself with mud and rotting vegetation. The stench was overwhelming, but I hoped it might mask my body heat from scanners. Hours passed. Search craft came and went, sometimes so close I could see the blue glow of their engines through the canopy. But none discovered my hiding place. Either my countermeasures had worked, or they had focused their search elsewhere. Either way, I had survived the first night of my second defection. With the first light of dawn, I assessed my situation. I had no supplies, no weapons, no communication devices. I was alone on an unfamiliar world with no clear destination beyond away from the Tau. I needed shelter, water, food. Basic survival first, then I could consider longer-term plans. The stream provided water, though I had no way to purify it, a risk I would have to take. Food was more challenging. I recognized none of the local plants and had no way to determine which might be edible. I would have to rely on observation, watching what local wildlife consumed. Shelter came in the form of a hollow between the roots of a massive tree, not comfortable but hidden and relatively dry. I spent that day recovering my strength and observing my surroundings, venturing out only to drink from the stream when thirst became unbearable. By the third day, hunger drove me to experimentation. I cautiously tasted berries I had seen small creatures eating, ready to spit them out at the first sign of bitterness. Some proved edible, providing minimal sustenance. Others caused my tongue to go numb, a warning I heeded immediately. A pattern emerged. Days spent foraging and exploring, nights huddled in makeshift shelters, always moving, never staying in one location long enough to establish a pattern. The search seemed to diminish over time, or perhaps simply move to other areas. Occasionally I spotted Tau craft in the distance, but they no longer seemed to be conducting active sweeps of my vicinity. I began to plan beyond mere survival. The rumors of a rogue human settlement nagged at me. If it existed, finding it represented my only hope for a life beyond constant flight. But I had no coordinates, no detailed information, only whispered rumors of a place beyond Tau control. 2 weeks into my wilderness existence, everything changed. I was setting crude snares, having graduated from berries to attempting to catch small game, when I heard movement in the underbrush. Too deliberate for an animal. I froze, searching for cover. Too late. A figure emerged from the trees. Human, male, dressed in a patchwork of Imperial and Tau garments supplemented with local materials. He carried a makeshift spear, pointed directly at me. Imperial or Tau? He demanded, his voice rough from disuse. Neither, I answered honestly. Not anymore. He studied me for a long moment, taking in my Tau administrator uniform, now tattered and filthy. Interface? He asked, gesturing to his own ear. I understood. He wanted to know if I had a neural implant. Yes, but no updates. It's being disabled. I touched the port behind my ear, which I had damaged intentionally during my first days in the wilderness, driving a sharp stick into the delicate machinery. He lowered his spear slightly. How long on the run? 2 weeks, approximately. He gave a short, harsh laugh. Longer than most. They usually catch runners within days. He gestured for me to follow him. Come on then. Nightfall soon. Not safe. I hesitated. This could be a trap. He could be leading me back to the Tau, a loyal Gueveza sent to recover escaped assets. He seemed to read my thoughts. If I served the blue skins, would I be living like this? He gestured to his ragged appearance. Trust or don't, your choice. But alone, you're already dead. He was right. Survival alone had been miracle enough. I needed allies if I had any hope of finding the rumored settlement or simply staying free. I followed. His camp was well hidden in a rocky outcropping, invisible until we were nearly upon it. 2 other humans waited there, a woman with close cropped gray hair and a younger man missing his left arm below the elbow. Both regarded me with suspicion. "Another runner," my guide announced. "Administratum, by the look of him. Why bring him here?" The woman demanded. "We move out tomorrow. No time for strays. He survived 2 weeks alone. Might be useful." The woman studied me with hard eyes. "Your name?" "Alaric Vey," I answered. "Former Administratum scribe, then Guevesa data analyst." "Why did you run, Alaric Vey?" I told them, about the research station, about the neural modifications, about the agricultural outpost where humans had been reduced to mindless drones. They listened without interruption. When I finished, the one-armed man spoke for the first time. "Has seen Phase 3. They don't usually let outsiders witness that. I was part of a delegation studying successful integration methods," I explained. "My clearance level gave me access to restricted information. The woman made a decision. You can travel with us tomorrow. To the gathering point. After that, the council decides." "Gathering point?" "Council," I asked. Questions later. My guide cut in. "Rest now, long walk tomorrow." They shared their food with me, a stew of local game and plants far more palatable than my foraging efforts. They revealed little about themselves, but I learned their names. My guide was Davin, former Imperial Guard sergeant. The woman was Mira, once a planetary defense force commander. The one-armed man was Talon, an ex-Navy tech specialist who had lost his limb during the Tau conquest of this world. All had chosen to flee rather than submit to full neural integration. All had been surviving in the wilderness for months, moving between hidden camps and gathering supplies for some larger purpose they refused to discuss in detail. We set out before dawn, moving through the forest with a purpose and direction that my aimless wandering had lacked. Davin took point, while Mira watched our rear. Talon walked beside me, his missing arm apparently no impediment to his woodland skills. "The neural port," he said after we had been walking for several hours. "It's still active. Limited function, but still a risk." I touched the interface behind my ear. I damaged it as best I could. Not enough. They can track the passive energy signature. Low range, but still dangerous. He produced a small tool from a pouch at his belt. "Next rest." I remove it completely. The procedure was painful but brief. Talon used a blade heated in fire to cut around the port, then specialized tools to disconnect it from my nervous system. The pain was intense but temporary. Freedom, it seemed, would require blood. We traveled for 3 days, moving only during daylight and hiding at night. Our path took us deeper into the wilderness, into mountains that rose sharp and sudden from the forested plains. Game trails became our roads, narrow passes our highways. On the 4th day, we reached a waterfall cascading down a sheer cliff face. Davin led us along a treacherous path behind the falling water, into a hidden cave system. The roar of the water masked all sound, a natural defense against detection. Inside, the caves extended deep into the mountain. Artificial lighting appeared as we progressed, simple chemical lamps that cast a pale blue glow over rough stone walls. And then, suddenly, we were no longer alone. Guards stood at a wider chamber entrance, armed with a mix of Imperial weapons and Tau technology modified to prevent signal transmission. They recognized my companions but regarded me with suspicion. "New recruit," Davin explained. "Runner from the central settlement, admin type with high clearance. Saw Phase 3 implementation." This information caused visible reaction among the guards. I was searched thoroughly, then allowed to pass into the chamber beyond. What I saw stole my breath. Not merely a hiding place or temporary camp, but a genuine settlement. The natural cavern had been expanded and reinforced. Dwellings had been constructed along the walls. Hundreds of humans moved about with purpose, carrying supplies, tending hydroponic gardens, maintaining equipment. "Welcome to New Haven," Mira said, allowing a small smile to break her stern demeanor. "The only truly free human settlement in this sector." I was led through the community to a central chamber where a group of 12 individuals sat in a rough circle. The council, I presumed. They represented diverse backgrounds, their clothing indicating imperial military, civilian, and even religious origins. All bore the marks of hard living and combat, scars both visible and hidden. Mira presented me to them, summarizing my story and the information I carried about Tau integration protocols. They listened intently, occasionally interrupting with sharp questions that tested my knowledge and veracity. Phase 3, neural modification, explains the reports from the agricultural zones, one council member said after I had finished. "No resistance, not even passive. Complete compliance. If they perfect this technique and deploy it widely, our recruitment pool vanishes," another added. "No one left with the will to resist." A gray-bearded man who appeared to be their leader addressed me directly. "You understand what we are, Alaric Vey." "A resistance movement," I ventured. "Humans who refuse both imperial oppression and Tau control." He nodded. "We call ourselves the Freeborn. Some were born free of both powers. Others, like you, chose freedom despite the cost. We believe humanity must chart its own course, not as servants to ancient tyrants or alien masters." "How many are you?" I asked. "Here, about 600. But this is just one haven. There are others, scattered across the fringes of Tau space. We maintain communication, share resources, coordinate activities." "You fight the Tau?" A woman with augmetic eyes answered. "We resist. Sometimes with weapons, more often with information and disruption. We help others escape. We preserve human culture and independence. Fighting directly would mean extinction." "And the Imperium?" I asked. "Do you coordinate with Imperial forces against the Tau?" The laughter that greeted this question was bitter. "The Imperium would execute us as heretics and traitors," the leader said. "We abandoned the Emperor's light after all. No, we stand alone, beholden to neither power. I absorbed this. A third path. Not the false freedom of the Tau greater good. Not the oppressive security of Imperial rule. True independence, with all its dangers and responsibilities." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you choose," the leader said. "Join us, with all the hardship that entails. Return to the Tau, though we cannot allow that physically. Or strike out on your own, though survival rates for solitary humans in this region are negligible." Put that way, there was no real choice at all. "I would join you, if you'll have me." The council conferred briefly. Then the leader nodded. "Your skills will be valuable. The Tau administration codes and protocols you know could help many others escape. But understand this is no easy life. Resources are limited, danger is constant, and there is no certainty of victory." "I understand," I said. "I choose freedom, whatever the cost." Thus began my third life. After imperial servitude and Tau deception, I found purpose among the Freeborn. My administrative skills proved useful in organizing supplies and coordinating between havens. My knowledge of Tau systems helped design countermeasures against their surveillance. I learned new skills too: basic combat training, wilderness survival, operation of salvaged equipment. The soft administrator who had fled the Imperium was gone, replaced by a harder, more capable man. Months became a year. We moved the haven twice to avoid detection. We conducted raids on Tau outposts to acquire supplies and technology. We rescued new defectors, bringing them to safety before the neural modifications could progress too far. I learned more about the Freeborn philosophy during this time. They rejected both the Tau collectivism that erased individuality and the imperial fanaticism that crushed it beneath dogma. They believed in self-determination, cooperation by choice rather than coercion, communities formed by mutual need and respect rather than fear or indoctrination. It was not perfect. Resources were always scarce. Disagreements arose over priorities and methods. Some wanted more aggressive action against the Tau. Others prioritized establishing sustainable settlements farther from Tau control. The Council mediated these disputes, maintaining unity through persuasion rather than force. I found unexpected joy in this harsh existence. Connections formed without the artificial harmony of Tau neural tampering. Relationships built on genuine understanding rather than enforced compliance. Even love, something I had never expected to experience in my carefully regulated imperial life. Her name was Laris, a former Mechanicus adept who had fled when her forge world was conquered by the Tau. She refused neural modification despite the Tau interest in her technical knowledge, eventually escaping with the help of early freeborn operatives. Her understanding of technology complemented my administrative skills. Together, we developed improved methods for disrupting Tau, communications and detecting surveillance. "Do you ever regret your choice?" she asked me once, as we worked together to modify a salvaged Vox unit. Leaving the Imperium? Abandoning security for this uncertain existence? I considered the question carefully. I regret my naivety, believing the Tau offered true freedom, but not the choice to seek something better than what I had. She nodded, understanding. The Mechanicus taught that knowledge is power, but controlled what knowledge we could access. The Tau claimed to value science, but only in service to their vision. Both fear truly free minds. And you? Do you regret leaving the certainty of the machine cult? She smiled, a rare expression that transformed her austere features. The Omnissiah is not confined to imperial interpretation. True understanding comes from exploration, not dogma. I serve the machine god better here, seeking knowledge freely, than I ever did reciting catechisms I was forbidden to question. Our philosophical discussions were interrupted by reality soon enough. Tau search patterns were changing, becoming more focused on regions where our havens operated. They had developed new detection methods specifically designed to locate human settlements operating outside their control. The Council debated our options. Some advocated moving farther from Tau space, perhaps even into the fringes of Imperial territory where both powers maintained minimal presence. Others argued for splitting into smaller groups to reduce detection risk. Still others suggested more aggressive action to acquire a vessel capable of interstellar travel. No consensus was reached before the decision was made for us. A scout returned with alarming news. A massive Tau force was moving through the region, conducting systematic sweeps with technology specifically calibrated to detect human biosignatures. They were hunting us with unprecedented resources. They fear us, the Council leader concluded, not our weapons or raids, but our example. Free humans living beyond their control threaten the narrative of the greater good more than any imperial crusade. Evacuation began immediately. Essential equipment was dismantled for transport. Supplies were distributed. Escape routes were assigned to different groups to maximize survival chances if some were intercepted. Laris and I were tasked with leading a group of 30 through a particularly treacherous mountain pass that the Tau would struggle to access with their heavy equipment. Our destination was a backup haven established months earlier, a system of caves nearly 100 kilometers distant. We moved at night, using the darkness to conceal our passage. The first 2 days were successful, putting significant distance between us and our abandoned haven. But on the third night, as we navigated a narrow ridge, disaster struck. Tau scout craft appeared without warning, their engines modified to run silent. Searchlights swept the ridge, illuminating our exposed position. There was no time for stealth or subterfuge. "Run!" I shouted, abandoning any pretense of quiet. "Scatter into the forest, regroup at the secondary rendezvous." Our group dispersed, fleeing in multiple directions as the scout craft called in reinforcements. Laris and I stayed to cover the retreat, using salvaged pulse weapons to drive back the first wave of Tau troops that deployed from the craft. "We can't hold them long," Laris said, her face illuminated by the flash of energy weapons. "You know what happens if we're captured?" I did. Neural reconfiguration at best. Complete personality erasure at worst. Better to die free than live as a mindless servant. "Go," I told her. "Take the eastern path. I'll draw them west." She gripped my arm. "Together or not at all." Before I could argue, a blast struck nearby, showering us with superheated rock fragments. Laris cried out, a shard penetrating her leg. The decision was made for us. I could not leave her, and she could not run. We fought as long as ammunition lasted, then retreated into a narrow crevice where the Tau would be forced to approach singly. When they came, we would sell our lives dearly. But the expected assault never materialized. Instead, the night was suddenly filled with new sounds: the crack of solid projectile weapons, the distinctive roar of Imperial flamers, human battle cries mixing with Tau commands. Imperial forces had stumbled upon the Tau pursuit, turning a manhunt into a three-way battle. In the confusion, we slipped away, half carrying Laris as her wounded leg threatened to collapse beneath her. By dawn, we had put several kilometers between ourselves and the battle, finding shelter in a dense thicket where I could treat Laris's wound. The fragment had passed clean through muscle without hitting bone or major blood vessels. Painful but not immediately life-threatening if infection could be prevented. "The Imperium," she said as I bandaged her leg. "Why here, why now? Coincidence, perhaps? Or the Tau incursion crossed into contested space?" I shook my head. Either way, it bought us time. If Imperial forces establish control here, what becomes of the freeborn? The Imperium has no more love for human independence than the Tau. It was a question that haunted us as we made our slow way toward the rendezvous point. The wound slowed our progress, turning what should have been a 2-day journey into 5. By the time we arrived, I feared all others would be long gone. Instead, we found almost our entire group waiting, along with refugees from other havens. Nearly 100 free humans gathered in a natural amphitheater, listening to council members debate their situation. We learned that Imperial forces had launched a surprise offensive against Tau holdings in this sector. Not a coincidence after all, but a coordinated strike against vulnerable Tau positions. The two powers were now locked in open conflict, with our region as the primary battleground. "We cannot and remain," one council member argued. "Caught between Tau hunters and Imperial crusaders, we will be annihilated. Where would we go?" Another countered. "Every nearby system is being drawn into this conflict." A third voice, one I recognized as belonging to Davin, offered another perspective. "This war creates opportunity. Both sides distracted, supply lines extended, vulnerable targets. You suggest we take advantage of the conflict, attack both sides?" The council leader sounded skeptical. "I suggest we secure our future. Find a vessel. Leave this death trap." The debate continued, but momentum built behind Davin's proposal. If both Tau and Imperial forces were committed to battle, their orbital defenses would be focused on each other. A small group might be able to capture a supply vessel, one capable of warp travel. The plan that emerged was audacious to the point of insanity. Using information from our scouts, we identified a Tau supply depot near the front lines, one serving as a staging area for reinforcements. Among the vessels coming and going was a modified merchant ship, large enough to carry hundreds but small enough to be operated by a minimal crew. The assault force would consist of 60 volunteers with combat experience, including Davin, Mira, and myself. Laris would remain behind, her wound still not fully healed, but would prepare technical packages to help us operate the captured vessel. "This is suicide," she told me the night before the operation. "Even if you capture the ship, you have no navigator, no way to safely traverse the warp." "We have former Navy personnel who understand short warp jumps," I countered. "We need only reach the fringes, beyond both Imperium's and Taus reach." She took my hand. "And then what? Establish a new colony with no support? Face all the horrors of an unclaimed world with limited supplies?" I had no answer that did not sound like desperate optimism. Better to die trying for true freedom than live under control. She kissed me then, fierce and desperate. Return to me, Alaric Vey. I did not find you in this nightmare galaxy only to lose you to false hope. I promised, knowing such promises were beyond my power to keep. The assault began at dusk, when the shifting light played tricks on even Tau optical sensors. We approached using captured Tau skimmers, modified to transmit appropriate identification codes. The ongoing conflict worked in our favor, as security protocols were focused on Imperial threats rather than disguised human rebels. We penetrated the outer perimeter without raising alarms, abandoning the skimmers to proceed on foot once within the compound. Divided into strike teams, we moved toward our objectives. Some targeted power generators, others communication arrays. My team, led by Davin, headed for the landing field where our target vessel awaited. The plan collapsed almost immediately. A security patrol spotted one of our teams placing charges on a generator station. Alarms blared. Defensive fire lanced through the growing darkness. Improvise, Davin growled, abandoning stealth for speed. Primary objective unchanged. We ran toward the landing field, firing at anything that moved. Other teams did the same, creating chaos across the compound. Explosions rippled as charges detonated, some placed according to plan, others thrown desperately as teams retreated. The ship loomed before us, larger than it had appeared in our reconnaissance images. A merchant vessel converted for troop transport, its boarding ramp lowered as Tau soldiers prepared to deploy to reinforce the compound. We hit them before they could organize, overwhelming the surprised troops with concentrated fire. Davin went down, a pulse round burning through his shoulder. I dragged him forward as Mira and others provided covering fire. "Get to the bridge," he gasped, pressing his weapon into my hands. "Take control. Everything else is secondary." I left him with two others and pushed forward, fighting through the ship's corridors. The interior was chaos. Tau crew members and soldiers responded to multiple threats as our teams forced their way aboard from different entry points. Alarms wailed. Emergency lighting cast everything in a surreal red glow. The bridge was sealed, but one of our team, a former Navy breacher, applied technical skills and explosives in equal measure. The door gave way with a shriek of twisted metal. Inside, Tau bridge officers turned in shock as we burst through. They reached for weapons, but too late. Within moments, the bridge was ours, though not without cost. Half my team lay dead or wounded by the time the last Tau officer fell. "Engineering reports secured," came a voice over the internal vox. "Life support under control, but we have Tau reinforcements approaching the ship." "Seal all hatches," I ordered. "Prepare for emergency liftoff." "We're missing half our assault force," Mira protested, having fought her way to the bridge after securing the main cargo hold. "We need to wait." There was no time to debate. Tau heavy weapons were beginning to target the ship from defensive positions around the landing field. The hull shuddered under repeated impacts. "We lift now or never lift at all," I said, gesturing to the former Navy helmsman who had joined us on the bridge. "Anyone not aboard is lost." The decision tormented me, but the alternative was failure. The helmsman engaged the primary drives. The ship shuddered, straining against docking clamps not designed to restrain an unauthorized departure. "Clamps still engaged," he reported. "We need more power or manual release." "Divert all non-essential systems to the drive," I ordered, remembering protocols from Tau vessels I had studied. "Overload if necessary." The lights dimmed as power shifted. The ship groaned, metal screaming as stress increased beyond design tolerances. Then, with a final wrenching shriek, the clamps gave way. We rose, awkward and lurching at first, then, with increasing speed as the helmsman gained control. Defensive fire followed us, some shots finding their mark despite evasive maneuvers. Damage reports flooded in from all sections. Hull breaches, power fluctuations, fire in the lower cargo holds. But we were free, rising through the atmosphere, pushing toward the cold embrace of void. Behind us, the supply depot receded, becoming a distant collection of lights, then nothing as clouds obscured our view. Tau vessels responding, reported a woman monitoring communication channels. Intercept course plotted. Estimate contact in 12 minutes. Not enough time to reach safe distance for warp translation. We would be caught, disabled, boarded, all for nothing. Then fortune, if it can be called that, intervened. Imperial naval vessels appeared on our sensors, moving to engage the Tau pursuers, not to save us, but as part of the larger conflict engulfing the sector. Yet the effect was the same. Our pursuers broke off to meet this greater threat. Set course for the system edge, I ordered. Prepare for warp translation as soon as safely possible. Translation without proper calculations or navigator, the helmsman warned. Extremely dangerous. Just a short jump, I insisted. Enough to break pursuit. We can recalculate at the destination. Hours passed as we fled toward the system's edge. Reports from throughout the ship painted a grim picture. Of the 60 who had begun the assault, fewer than 40 survived. Many of those were wounded. The ship itself had sustained significant damage, with multiple sections depressurized. Yet, as the stars around us multiplied with increasing distance from the system's sun, hope grew. We had done the impossible, escaped both Tau and Imperial control, captured a vessel capable of interstellar travel, approaching minimum safe distance for warp translation, the helmsman announced. Course calculations complete for short jump to uninhabited system designated KX-119. Proceed, I ordered, even as alarms sounded from the communication station. Multiple vessels on intercept course, the communications officer reported. Tau configuration, heavy combat craft. They had broken away from the Imperial engagement, prioritizing our capture over the larger battle. The greater good could not allow the example we represented to escape. Time to intercept, 22 minutes at current speed. Time to warp translation readiness, 18 minutes minimum. Too close. We would be caught at the most vulnerable moment, preparing to enter the warp. I made the only decision possible. Begin translation preparations. Divert all non-essential power to engines and shields. We pushed the captured vessel beyond safe limits, straining systems never designed for such treatment. The pursuing Tau fleet gained steadily despite our efforts. Weapon lock warnings sounded as they came within extreme firing range. Translation in 3 minutes, the helmsman reported, his voice steady despite the situation. The first shots from the pursuing fleet struck our aft shields, depleting them by 20% in a single volley. Return fire was pointless with our limited armaments. All we could do was endure and hope the warp engines engaged before our shields failed completely. Translation in 60 seconds. The ship shuddered as more shots found their mark. Shield failure warnings blared across multiple stations, hull breaches reported in aft sections. Translation in 10 seconds. The viewports filled with the glow of charging Tau weapons, preparing a final volley that would cripple our drives. Translation now. Reality tore around us. The familiar stars vanished, replaced by the swirling madness of the warp. The pursuing Tau fleet disappeared, separated from us by the veil between real space and the immaterium. We had escaped. Into tremendous danger, certainly. A damaged ship in the warp without proper navigation was a death sentence by most reckonings, but it was a sentence of our own choosing, not one imposed by Tau or Imperial masters. The journey through the warp was mercifully brief but terrifying. Strange energies played across the hull. Nightmares plagued those trying to rest. Shadows moved in peripheral vision, then vanished when directly observed. But the rudimentary Geller field held, protecting us from the worst horrors of the immaterium. Our emergence into real space came suddenly, drives automatically cutting out as pre-programmed coordinates were reached. The system that greeted us was unremarkable, a yellow star, rocky inner planets, gas giants in the outer reaches, no signs of habitation or technology. We had truly escaped, beyond Imperial control, beyond Tau expansion. A group of free humans with a damaged ship and limited supplies, but with something precious few in the galaxy possessed: true self-determination. The challenges ahead were immense: repairing the ship, finding a habitable world, establishing a colony that might survive, returning for the others we had left behind, including Laris. But for the first time since leaving the Imperium, I felt genuine hope. Not the false promise of the greater good, but the hard-earned possibility of charting our own course. I stood on the bridge, watching as the system star rose over the curve of an unexplored planet. Mira joined me, her face showing the same mix of exhaustion and wonder that I felt. "Was it worth it?" she asked quietly. "All the death? The sacrifices?" I thought of the Imperium, grinding humanity beneath the weight of eternal war and superstition. I thought of the Tau, offering peaceful assimilation at the cost of everything that made us human. I thought of my journey from obedient scribe to defector to rebel. "Freedom is never without cost," I answered. But the alternative was no life at all. Just existence in service to someone else's vision. She nodded, understanding. "So what happens when humans reject both paths? When we choose our own way?" I gestured toward the unknown world turning slowly beneath us. "We find out together."